Turcaholics, and thank you very much for listening to this episode of Football a la Turca. My name is Kaan Bayazit, and as promised, we are bringing you our fourth and final European group stage preview. We've covered all the Europa League groups with Group C, J, and K featuring Trabzonspor, Başakşehir, and finally Beşiktaş. That episode is exclusively available on the Black Eagles podcast feed. So today we are focusing on the UEFA Champions League, and of course that will feature the reigning defending Turkish Super League champions Galatasaray, who were drawn in Group A. A tough group because from Pot 1 they got Paris St Germain, from Pot 2 they got Real Madrid, and from Pot 3 they got Club Brugge. That will certainly prove to be a tough challenge, but we'll have to wait and see how Galatasaray fare in this group. Please don't forget to share and subscribe to the podcast and drop us a 5-star review on iTunes. And if you would like to support the podcast through other means, please head over to www.patreon.com/Falt. That's spelled out Falt. And you can become an official Turcaholic or a Turcamaniac supporting the podcast. But without further ado, let's get straight into it. Let's start off with Paris St Germain. We're going to start off by talking about the Pot 1 team, which is Paris St Germain, and joining us live right now is the official correspondent for ESPN for Paris St Germain, Jonathan Johnson, live from Paris. Jonathan, thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks a lot for having me on.
So Jonathan, obviously Paris St Germain, the league winners once again in France last season. What is it now? 8 out of the last 9 years or so. I think Monaco got one in between there, but it's been pretty dominant for PSG the last decade or so in France.
Yeah, absolutely. Although, that said, last season wasn't PSG's finest moment. Yes, they did win Ligue 1. Were quite comfortable. I don't think they even slipped off of top spot after, I don't know, even just like a couple of weeks. I mean, it was pretty much a straight run. I think they even hit top spot before the end of August and stayed there the whole way through. But, the Champions League didn't go according to plan, where they dropped out in the round of 16 after that unbelievable reversal. Home to Manchester United after winning away. The biggest surprise, I think, of this season was actually the way that they underperformed in the domestic cups, because it's usually assumed that PSG will win one, if not both, of the Coupe de France and Coupe de la Ligue. But for them to go out in the Coupe de la Ligue quarterfinals at home to Guingamp, despite the fact it was a very bizarre match, that was a big shock. And then to lose the Coupe de France final in the way that they did against Rennes on penalties, nobody saw that coming either. So last season, despite the fact that PSG did guarantee themselves Champions League football again for this campaign, it was arguably the least successful season since their debut term under the Qataris.
So is it a surprise to you that Thomas Tuchel was allowed to remain in place as Paris Saint-Germain's coach following last season's disappointment?
It wasn't so much a surprise that he was allowed to stay in place. What was a surprise was him being handed the contract extension at the end of last season. But then again, this is something that, knowing what was going on at the club, the actual contract extension was signed before PSG came up against Manchester United in the Champions League and ended up going out. And bizarrely, PSG decided to wait until the end of a very disappointing season to announce the news. So it came about at a strange time, even though Tuchel had put pen to paper on it months before it was actually made official by PSG. So, that I'd say that the contract extension, if it was something that PSG could have gotten out of, was a bit bizarre given the way that the season finished. That said, I think PSG did really need to give Tuchel another season, particularly with the way that things went very, very well in the first part of the campaign, and then things unravelled due to some pretty big slices of misfortune. Another injury to Neymar. Cavani also picked up an injury and continues to pick up injuries. So it was a little surprising to see Tuchel backed when you consider the way that the last season finished, but also at the same time it was quite good to see him given this season to prove himself. But I think with a new sporting director in charge now, with Leonardo returning to the club over the summer, I'm not so sure that Tuchel will receive the same confidence next summer if PSG suffer an equally fruitless season.
And you already spoke about the man a little bit. You spoke about Neymar, of course, and the whole summer has kind of been dominated by rumors of will he stay, will he go, and Real Madrid were being linked, of course, and Barcelona were being rumored, and there were serious rumors up until deadline day that Neymar would actually return to Barcelona. But it ended up not happening. Tuchel has spoken about him numerous times throughout the summer, not really being sure about what the situation was with the Brazilian. And yeah, he ended up staying. Is he going to get reintegrated into the squad? I know there's some issues with the Paris St Germain's ultras who aren't too keen on it. What's the situation there? And if he doesn't get reintegrated, who are Paris St Germain going to look towards to lead the charge, so to speak, in going into the Champions League and the season as a whole?
I mean, I don't think PSG are going to let somebody of Neymar's ability and value just rot in the reserves. I think they will bring him back into the fold and try to figure out a way forward with him as part of the squad. But I mean, something that's worth bearing in mind with Neymar, I mean, before we even get into sorts of the alternatives when he's not playing, is the fact that he's banned for half of the Champions League group stage. So, he won't be playing against Real Madrid at home. He won't be playing away at Galatasaray. And he won't be playing away at Club Brugge either. So, that's 3 matches that Neymar is definitely going to miss. So, in those games, PSG are going to have to rely on the likes of Kylian Mbappe, the likes of Edinson Cavani, and particularly the likes of Mauro Icardi, because I'm not convinced, certainly regarding Cavani, when you consider how often he's been injured over the last sort of 12 to 18 months. I'm not convinced that both of those guys are going to be back in time for the group opener against Real Madrid. I imagine that both will be operational by the time the start of October rolls around. So that trip away to Galatasaray, which is going to be a very fiery affair when you consider the history that these two sets of fans have, particularly after the 2001 hooligan clashes. So it's shaping up to be very interesting as far as PSG and Galatasaray are concerned, and where Neymar is concerned. We're just going to have to wait and see how PSG play it. But that suspension is obviously going to keep him out of a large chunk of Champions League action. But I do think as soon as the international break is over and club football comes back, we'll see him feature against Strasbourg, which is PSG's first fixture, which comes up before the Real Madrid one. But he was a surprise addition towards the end of the transfer window, and PSG are going to need to get Icardi up to speed as quickly as possible, because he is on his day. When he's fit and in form, he's an absolutely lethal striker. I don't think there are many better candidates in terms of considering the long-term future without Edinson Cavani than Icardi. I think that although Icardi comes with a lot of baggage, he is a relatively low-risk move for PSG, considering that they're not tied into signing him. They can wait and see how things play out. And if it does end up being a one-season thing, they've only paid a small loan fee. But also at the same time, if he does perform as well as we've seen him perform for Inter Milan in the past, and is equally prolific and is very useful in Europe, then I think sort of paying 65 to 70 million euros to make the deal permanent. Although it's a lot of money for quite a few European clubs, PSG can afford that sort of sum, and that's the kind of money that they were always going to need to pay to replace somebody like Cavani. And I think that Icardi, when you bear in mind the player's ability and characteristics on its own, without some of the stress that goes with the Icardi show away from the pitch, I think that it could turn out to be a very good move for PSG. So, I think these first couple of group stage matches, the one against Galatasaray included, is going to be, very, very telling as to how PSG's continental campaign is going to go, who are going to be the key protagonists. And I think that Icardi, certainly with Neymar ruled out through suspension and Mbappe and Cavani's status kind of unknown at this moment in time, I think he's going to have to be the main man. Neymar, I'm sure, will be back in the picture by the time PSG host Galatasaray in the final group stage match. But then again, depending on how the group goes, that match might not count for too much, depending on results. So, we'll have to wait and see. But I definitely think that Neymar will be reintegrated into the squad over the next few weeks and months, and I definitely think that he'll be playing a part by the time Galatasaray visit Parc des Princes in December.
And what type of football do you see Paris St Germain playing now, especially now without Cavani, without Neymar for the time being? What type of football will Thomas Tuchel be trying to play in the Champions League in these early matches, you believe, and in the early stages of the domestic competition?
Well, I think one good thing with not having to rely on Cavani is that it means that in attack PSG are much faster, which will be particularly useful up against a team like Real Madrid, who look quite sluggish so far this season. I think that obviously having speed is always going to be a big boost when you're playing away, especially at very intimidating venues. And Galatasaray, it doesn't get much more intimidating for teams in terms of Champions League away days. So I think that actually not having Cavani in some of these Champions League matches will be a benefit in terms of the mobility of the attack. But then again, Cavani's experience, does always come to the fore and is very useful. And if he can get himself back to a good level of fitness quite quickly, his goal scoring ability obviously is something that PSG can't really do without either. But all things considered, I do see PSG's main attacking play revolving around the likes of Icardi, Mbappe, Angel Di Maria, Pablo Sarabia, those kind of guys. In the first few group stage matches, it'll be interesting to see how Tuchel plays it when he finally has a fully fit squad available to him, because we saw him getting very experimental with a lot of his formations last season. We haven't seen as much of that this season so far, but then again, we know that Tuchel built his vision for PSG around Neymar. Neymar hasn't been available up until now. So will him being reintegrated change things? We'll have to wait and see. But the fact of the matter is that after this summer, which I believe has been a good summer as far as PSG are concerned, Tuchel now has options in a lot of different areas of the pitch, options that he didn't have last season, particularly in midfield, which was very regularly threadbare. He's no longer going to have to play Marquinhos as a makeshift defensive midfielder, because he's got Idrissa Gueye, he's got Ander Herrera available to him now. Obviously, he's got Marco Verratti as well. So, PSG should be, a different beast in this season's Champions League, whether or not, they have the likes of Neymar and Cavani available to play. But I do think, certainly in those first couple of matches, particularly going forward, a lot of PSG's play is going to be based around pace and the ability to do quite technical things, while the ball is moving around at a very high speed.
And of course, as you pointed out, rightfully so, PSG have an amazing squad, have a lot of quality. But where are the teams such as Galatasaray and Club Brugge, but maybe even Real Madrid, going to have to look towards exploiting Paris St Germain? What are their main weaknesses, if they have any, really?
PSG's obvious main weakness has always been mental. They're very easy to rattle, which is why hostile atmospheres can regularly play into the home side's hands, because PSG, lose sort of, they're cool, and they become easier to get at. The other obvious weaknesses, aside from the mentality, are in the two fullback positions. I'm a big fan of Juan Bernat, and I think he's particularly good going forward. But I think that defensively, it is easier for teams to get at him from time to time. And on the right as well, Thomas Meunier has lost his place in the starting 11. It's Colin Dagba, the youth academy graduate, who's getting quite a few starts at the moment under Tuchel. But we've also seen Tuchel in Europe last season, putting players like Thilo Kehrer at right back as sort of a makeshift option to add a bit of solidity, and also to enable his defence to morph into from different shapes. Whether or not we'll see that sort of tactical flexibility come back, we're just going to have to wait and see. But it is one of the hallmarks of Tuchel as a coach. But I definitely think that the main areas that all of PSG's Champions League group stage opponents should be targeting should be their fullbacks and also their mentality. Otherwise, I think PSG looks stronger than ever this season. I was always a big fan of Alphonse Areola in goal. I think it is a shame that he's been sent on loan to Real Madrid until the end of the season. Whether or not he comes back and establishes himself in the future, we'll have to wait and see. But Keylor Navas, is a tried and tested, 3-time consecutive Champions League winning goalkeeper. So I think that defense is going to get a big boost from that. Abdou Diallo has been added at the back as well, so he gives a bit of extra depth, a bit of versatility as well. Midfield, like I said, it's been completely rejigged since last season. There's been there's been some new faces added, so Tuchel suddenly has a wealth of options available to him, as opposed to last season when he regularly had to play Marquinhos, who I might add, makes a very good deep-lying midfielder, surprisingly creative considering, he's normally a central defender. But, those options are far more plentiful now for Tuchel. And then when you look at PSG's attack, I don't really think you can name any other clubs in Europe who boast as much firepower as PSG do at this moment in time.
So maybe it will finally be the year for them in the Champions League. But what are your general expectations of this group? Who will end top, who will end bottom, and in between?
I think that the obvious matches to look at in terms of dictating who's going to finish top and second will be those two PSG Real Madrid matches. And I think, although it's not ideal for PSG to be going up against Real immediately, I do think that it is a decent time to play Real because they look like they're yet to get going. So I think if PSG can beat Real in the same way that they beat Barcelona early on in the group stage a couple of years ago, I think that sets them up well for a crack at top spot. And I'm confident that PSG could actually end this group stage on top ahead of Real Madrid. And then for me, I think it's going to be Galatasaray coming third, and Club Brugge, coming in last in fourth. But it wouldn't surprise me if either Real or PSG finished top of the group. But I definitely don't think it'll be either Galatasaray or Club Brugge finishing ahead of a team like PSG or Real.
And then finally, do you have any good travel tips for fans of Galatasaray or Club Brugge or Real Madrid deciding to make the trip to Paris?
I mean, there's so many travel tips, I guess, that I could pass on. There's so many fantastic places to go and eat and drink. The travel links in Paris are fantastic as well. So it's very easy to sort of get around and see a lot of the city in a very short space of time. I guess my main tip would be, depending as well on what time of year, they visit Paris, it would be to absolutely make the most of the opportunities to not only go to the match, but to also see a lot of the city. And like I said, Paris with its travel links is very, very, very accessible. There's a lot of different things to see, must-do things for tourists to put on their list. And given that most of the visits to Paris are going to be in November and December, I think people should definitely leave themselves, say, like a day or so either side of the match to make the most of the city, because it is it's a beautiful city, and it's a fantastic opportunity to come to Paris and also see a very high quality game of football. Whichever the visiting team is to Parc des Princes.
Yeah, and come to think of it, it really is a group of 4 tremendous city trips. I think all 4 are definitely worth going to. Istanbul, of course, a fantastic city. Club Brugge is an amazing city to visit. Paris, of course, and Madrid. So if you're considering going, go to all 4 if you could, I think.
Yeah, well, that's the situation I'm in at the moment, where obviously I'm lucky enough to live and work in Paris. I know Madrid as a city because I've been there a couple of times before, but I will be going back for the Real match, and I'm interested to discover Istanbul and Bruges as well, because they're 2 cities that I've never seen before, but I've heard good things about them, and this is another another plus point, another recommendation. So I'm definitely looking forward to checking both of them out.
Well, thank you very much, Jonathan Johnson, PSG correspondent for ESPN. We'll be continuing our Group A preview with Real Madrid next. And from pot 2 are the UEFA Champions League record winners, Real Madrid. Obviously the winners in 3 of the past 4 years. Not so lucky last season. But they are, of course, on paper at least, the biggest club in Europe. And here to talk to us about Real Madrid is the Spain correspondent for the London Evening Standard, Ben Hayward. Thank you for joining us, Ben.
Hello, Khan. How are you doing?
And Ben, you're, of course, mainly a football journalist focusing on the Spanish league and, of course, Real Madrid, I guess, because you're based in Madrid, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, that's right. I cover La Liga, and yeah, I'm based in Madrid, but essentially somewhere between Madrid and Barcelona. I pretty much come and go between the two, covering Real Madrid and Barcelona, which are pretty much the 2 biggest clubs in the world. So yeah, that keeps me busy.
Yeah, and that's why I watched my words a little bit there, because Barcelona fans may disagree with Real Madrid being the biggest club in the world, but I think statistically you can't really deny Real Madrid's supremacy over the history of global football.
Yeah, I think they're the biggest. I mean, Barcelona have just had probably the greatest era in their history. You certainly under Pep Guardiola, and winning, Champions Leagues, winning a couple of trebles, and obviously with Lionel Messi and everything. But Real Madrid have 13 European Cups, and I think they're probably still the biggest club in the world, even though Barcelona have certainly closed the gap now. They're pretty close.
Yeah, and even in that dominance, that almost, more than a decade of dominance, from almost 2 decades, I guess, from Barcelona, Real Madrid still went from 8 to 13. So even in that dominant period for Barcelona, Real Madrid still won the most amount of Champions League trophies, if I'm not mistaken. So undeniable, I guess. Not that I'm a Real Madrid fan or anything, by the way.
They've kind of frustrated each other in a way, because Barcelona have been winning the leagues every year, and Real Madrid fans are frustrated because they can't win La Liga, apart from a couple of times, in the last decade. And then, Barcelona fans are frustrated because while they're dominating at home in the league and the cup, Real Madrid have still been winning the Champions League. So they both have their issues, shall we say?
Yeah, and a tough draw here in the Champions League too. I think a very tough group with Paris St Germain coming out of pot 1, of course. Now Real Madrid out of pot 2, and then Club Brugge and Galatasaray out of the other 2 pots. Is definitely going to be an interesting group. But let's talk a little bit about Real Madrid. How did they manage to qualify for the Champions League this season? How did they fare in La Liga last season? We already alluded to it a little bit, that Real Madrid have gotten frustrated a little bit by Barcelona in the domestic league.
Yeah, I mean, it was a very difficult season actually last season. The last 2 seasons really have been difficult for Real Madrid. Of course, the season before last, they went on to win the Champions League for the 3rd time in a row under Zidane, the famous three-peat. But that maybe papered over some of the cracks that we saw. It wasn't the same dominant Real Madrid that we'd seen in 2016-17 when they won La Liga. They won the Champions League, also emphatically beating Juventus in the final. In Zidane's last season, there were problems in La Liga. They finished in 3rd place, way behind Barcelona. But then, of course, they won the Champions League, so everything was kind of forgotten in a way. Last season, Zidane left, Cristiano Ronaldo left, and the team had a lot of troubles. Some of the things that we'd seen the season before, and of course without Ronaldo as well, and they only reached the last 16 of the Champions League. They finished 19 points behind Barcelona in La Liga, in third place, comfortably qualifying for the Champions League, but not really good enough for a team like Real Madrid, who was supposed to be, challenging on all fronts, let's be honest. So a very, very disappointing season for Real Madrid, last one.
Yeah, and let's immediately address the elephant in the room. Cristiano Ronaldo, you mentioned him already. Of course, this is the post-Ronaldo era for Real Madrid that started last season. And generally you'd say, well, maybe there's a transitional year, but probably Barcelona will run into the same problem when Lionel Messi ends up leaving or retiring or whatever. So with that season under their belt, a transitional season now, there's been a little bit of movement on the transfer market this window. Eden Hazard, a big move coming in from Chelsea, of course, but I believe he's injured right now. Didn't look super fit in preseason, but that's normal for Hazard. He tends to put on some weight. But who are the key players now for Real Madrid now that Ronaldo has left? Who are the guys that are going to have to make it happen for Madrid in the Champions League and the season in general?
Well, I think it's understandable that Real Madrid would miss Ronaldo, and he scored 450 goals in 9 seasons at the club, which is just phenomenal. So take those goals out of the equation, and other players need to step up, and that wasn't the case last season. Obviously, Gareth Bale had his problems through injury. Benzema scored about 30 goals last season, had a good season, but it wasn't enough. As I said, Ronaldo maybe papered over some of the cracks in his last season at the club, and without him there last year, then we really noticed some of the team's deficiencies. I feel the midfield now is getting older. It was supposed to be the top priority for Madrid to bring in a midfielder. Zidane wanted to bring in Paul Pogba in the summer. That didn't really happen. So, you mentioned Hazard. I think there's going to be a lot of responsibility for him this season. He's injured, as you say, at the moment. It's only a minor problem. He should be back, once the international break is out of the way. And, he's going to be very, very important. And Gareth Bale, having stayed at the club in the summer when we all thought he was going to leave, I think is going to be important as well. He's been a starter for Real Madrid in each of the first 3 league games. He scored both goals for the club at Villarreal in La Liga on Sunday. And let's see if Bale can have better luck maybe with injuries this season. I think he's going to be a very, very important player for Zidane in what's been a bit of a turnaround, really, and also James Rodriguez, getting a second chance at the club when he looks certain to leave. Obviously, he's spent the last couple of seasons at Bayern Munich. So, not the big changes maybe we expected at Real Madrid over the summer, and it's going to be a lot of responsibility on Hazard to perform, on Benzema as well to score goals, and maybe on Luka Jovic as well to deliver after signing in the summer.
Yeah, and it's a question whether you can put that much of a responsibility on a 20-year-old striker. I believe he's 20 or 19 even. Very young striker, very talented, of course. And similar situation kind of what we saw with Paris St Germain too, with Neymar. The entire summer, it's kind of like everyone assuming he's going to end up leaving, whether it would be to Barcelona or Real Madrid, but then he ended up staying. Now, of course, with Gareth Bale, everyone was expecting him to go to China. He ended up staying. So some funny parallels there between the Pot 1 and Pot 2 teams in this group. But you also spoke about the coach, Zinedine Zidane. He left at the beginning of last season. I believe Solari came in to replace him from the youth team. That didn't work out too well. And then, of course, Zidane returning now in what was expected him to, I guess people expected him to rebuild the team, and you already said Pogba is a player he wanted to bring in. He seemed to have some issues with Bale. What kind of football is Zidane trying to play with this new Real Madrid post Cristiano Ronaldo, where everything revolved around Ronaldo basically?
Yeah, it's a good question, Khan. Obviously, remember that first of all, it was Julen Lopetegui that came in to replace Zidane. The
Right,
former,
but that was so short. I already forgot about it.
Yeah, it didn't go well, and I don't think he really had the time that he wanted and maybe needed to change the entire playing style at Real Madrid, and it didn't go well. Then Solari came in. Things went well for a while, and then in that calamitous space of a week where Real Madrid lost La Liga, lost the Copa del Rey, and lost the Champions League against Barcelona at home a couple of times, and then against Ajax, everything went wrong. And Zidane came back, as something of a hero, really. But you ask about the playing style, and that's an interesting one because one of the big criticisms of Zidane is, even now, after all this time, we're not entirely sure about his tactical plan. Obviously, it made sense with Cristiano Ronaldo to put a lot of crosses into the box. Ronaldo's probably the best header of the ball in world football, and he scored a lot of goals that way. And Ronaldo could also score, out of nothing with individual brilliance. And with Real Madrid's midfield, Luka Modric, Toni Kroos, there was the creative ability there to be able to feed Ronaldo. We saw Benzema playing in a much more unselfish role, dropping deep to set up Cristiano or to set up Gareth Bale. But Real Madrid were essentially a counter-attacking team, and they were devastating at it. They were fantastic at their best. They were certainly brilliant at soaking up the pressure in Europe, and then with the quality in midfield, being able to break at speed, and they had that technical ability as well. But there's some doubts now about what Real Madrid are trying to do under Zidane. What is the tactical plan? The midfield, as I said, is getting older than before. Against Villarreal, for example, they bombarded the area with crosses and didn't score any goals that way. And with Ronaldo now not at the club, it maybe doesn't make so much sense to play that way. So I think maybe it's going to be difficult for Zidane this season without Cristiano. And as I said, with the midfield getting a little bit older, I think the club could do with a better tactical plan. And I think there's big question marks over whether Zidane could deliver that.
So what would you highlight as the major strength right now for Real Madrid and their major weakness right now? What are Paris St Germain, Galatasaray and Club Brugge going to have to look to try and exploit if they want to upset Real Madrid?
Well, in terms of the major strength, I mean, Real Madrid's squad, it has some weaknesses, but let's be honest, it's still a tremendous squad full of world-class players. The likes of Luka Modric, Toni Kroos, Isco, James Rodriguez, Gareth Bale, Eden Hazard, Benzema. I mean, world-class players who, any of whom are match winners on their day. So, for the problems for all the problems that maybe I've highlighted before, Real Madrid still have a wonderful team, wonderful players that are capable on their day of winning any match in any competition. So I think that makes Real Madrid dangerous. And, in terms of weaknesses, defensively, they haven't been good. I mean, obviously in pre-season they struggled a lot. And that was when Casemiro was missing. Casemiro is the only defensive midfielder now at the club. So if he gets injured, that's a big problem for Real Madrid. But in any case, I think Real Madrid's defence has struggled. Sergio Ramos, I don't think, has had a good start to the season. He made a calamitous error at the weekend against Villarreal, and he looks way off his best for me. That partnership, Ramos and Varane, has been great over the years, but at the moment it's looking shaky. Marcelo, if he plays on the left, is an area that many teams will look to exploit. Last season he was very, very poor, and was exploited by a lot of different teams. They would attack down his side and often score goals. Obviously, Real Madrid have brought in Ferland Mendy in the summer, and he made his debut against Villarreal. He was good. in that match, and it may be something that Zidane looks at in the Champions League. If he wants the team to be defensively stronger, he may pick Mendy over Marcelo. But if Marcelo plays, then there's going to be problems in defence, I think. And yeah, as I mentioned, Ramos and Varane, bit of a concern as well.
When you take a look at the draw with Paris St Germain, of course, coming out of the first pot, and then Club Brugge and Galatasaray out of pot 3 and pot 4, when you look at this group, do you think Real Madrid should have any struggles qualifying for the next round? Where do you expect them to finish, and how do you expect the group in general to finish after the 6th match day?
Well, they shouldn't have any problem qualifying for the next round. I mean, Real Madrid have never not qualified from this first from the group stage in the Champions League. And if you look at this group, then you have to say that Real Madrid and Paris St Germain are the clear favourites to go through. I think the games against PSG are going to be interesting, and I don't think Real Madrid are going to have everything all their own way in those fixtures. But I do think they'll be too strong for Club Brugge and for Galatasaray. I'm sure that Real Madrid will get through. It would be a disaster if they didn't. And I think what we might see them go through in second place, though I'm not convinced about Real Madrid at the moment. Although they've had a decent start to the season. They've won one game so far, drawn the other two. They remain unbeaten after what was a very difficult pre-season. I think they'll get through this with few problems, but I think it might be in second place behind PSG.
And then from your knowledge on the other two teams, who do you expect third and fourth place will go to?
I mean, you will know better than me, living in Belgium and being Turkish, obviously. I like the look of Club Brugge. Let's see what they can do in the competition. It's good to see them there, and I'm not sure, but maybe Club Brugge to get third place, but I'm not sure at the moment. I think PSG and Real Madrid will be too strong for the other two.
I think it's a fair assessment, but surprises can always happen in football, of course. So finally, Ben, before we end this segment, do you have any good tips for fans of Club Brugge, Galatasaray, Paris St Germain who decide to make the trip to Madrid for the away game? Is there anything they have to go and do, somewhere they have to go and eat, something they have to try? Any travel tips?
That's a good one. There's so many places in Madrid, the whole area around Plaza Mayor and Sol is great for visitors, and I'm sure there's lots of cafes and bars and restaurants around that area. It's a really, really lively city. Obviously, it's a football city as well. I don't know if they'll be able to coincide it with doing a tour of the Bernabeu or doing a tour of the Wanda, some two great stadiums in Madrid, and of course maybe something that perhaps fans wouldn't think to visit. There's a place in Madrid called Templo de Debod. It's an Egyptian temple which is really, really beautiful, and you can go there and watch the sun go down. And that's something that, maybe fans might not consider doing, but it's something I would recommend.
Okay, thank you, Ben Hayward, Spanish football correspondent for the London Evening Standard. And from pot 3 we are focusing on Club Brugge, the runners-up in Belgium last season. And joining us right now is Guillaume Maebe, a Belgian football journalist and also editor for het Nieuwsblad in Belgium and podcast host for Shotcast. If you speak Dutch, go check that out. He hosts it with Gert Gijzen and Lars Godot. So definitely if you speak Dutch, go give it a look. There's some fun stories in there from time to time. Sinan Bollat's been addressed, fun stories about Mbaye Diagne from his time in Belgium. His previous time in Belgium. Yeah, thank you very much, Guillaume, for joining us again.
Yeah, no problem, Khan.
And of course, you were on last season as well when we did the preview for Racing Genk, Beşiktaş's opponent at the time in the Europa League. And of course, Many of those players have since scattered across Europe after Genk won the Belgian league title. They were very successful last season, but probably one of their biggest departures was coach Philippe Clement, and guess where he ended up? Club Brugge, of course, which is Galatasaray's opponent in the Champions League. So let's get straight into it. First and foremost, let's talk a little bit about how Club Brugge managed to qualify for the Champions League. How did they do in the league last season? What has changed in the meantime? And how did they get through the qualifiers?
Yeah, so the answer only on that question would take about an hour, I think. But Bruges last season became second. It was actually a logical win for Genk, the title race. They were foremost the best team with the best coach, maybe also with the players who were the most in shape and just delivered the most. But Bruges, in the meantime, has poached the coach of the champion, Philippe Clement, who has a history at Bruges as a player, as an assistant coach, as a trainer of a youth team. So he is also seen as a very modern coach who likes to use statistics, who likes to analyze data, who does a lot of video work, who also is very good in communication with his players and the players, especially those who won't play during games. So actually, he's almost a great package deal actually as a coach. So his return to Bruges has been very important for a club because he manages to make the strengths look nice from Bruges and also has the skill to eliminate all the weaknesses. How did they qualify for Europe? They had Dynamo Kiev as a first opponent, which actually went quite easily. There was a 1-0 win at home. And after that, a 3-3 draw in Ukraine, which was actually a hell of a game with a lot of chances for Dynamo Kiev in the beginning of the game, and Bruges then on a corner equalized, and it went so on. Ukraine could have made the winning goal, but eventually Bruges managed to win quite easily. I would have expected Dynamo Kiev to be better. And in the last qualifier, Las Klins, the Austrian team, came up, who doesn't have the quality to be a Champions League team, but they do have the mentality and the tactics to make it every team difficult, because they love to play high press, and you never know if they succeed in scoring 1 or 2 goals in the first 15 or 20 minutes, then they are also able to lay back and make every opponent difficult, because they have to play against a wall who also knows how to play a counter-attack. But Bruges also managed to beat them. And I said that the corner goal against Dynamo Kiev was very important. It has been important throughout the qualifications, because I think they've scored 5 out of 7 goals came after a set piece situation, and 3 of them were corners. So Bruges know their set pieces, and it's an additional weapon to the normal regular strengths of the team.
Yeah, so let's highlight a little bit of those strengths in terms of the key players for the team. Who would you say are the most important players for Club Brugge? And for example, who is responsible for those great set pieces?
Well, you must say Hans van Aken. Hans van Aken is a Belgian Golden Shoe, which is the prize or the award for the best player in the competition, and he is more than ever the leader of this bunch of players. He has been in Bruges for several years now. There was also interest from Ajax last summer, but he stayed in Bruges and also got a new, better contract. He always was one of the key players of the team, but now you can say he is the solely key player, because he plays more in the center of the field, despite the fact that in the previous seasons Bruges used a 3-5-2 system where he was forced to go out to the left wing or came from the left wing to the center. Now he has a more free role, but you could say that his natural role or his natural position is the center of the field, so he appears there a lot of the times. And he's a real playmaker. He has the looks of a target striker. He's about 191 meters high, so he doesn't look like a very technical skilled player, but he really is, and he has the finesse and the passing skills of what could we say, a Spanish playmaker who is 1.60 meters. So he's definitely important. He also scores a lot on those set pieces with the head. He also always manages to be there on the right place, together with Simon Dely, who is a new central defender. Those two are actually the main targets during those set pieces. And those set pieces are being kicked by Ruud Vormer, who is captain of the team, who is a Dutchman, but also has been in Bruges for now 6 years, I think. And he really has a very fine pass, a very fine kick in him, and is also the heart of the team. If you combine those technical players who also have the traditional Bruges mentality of going full gas during the games for 90 minutes. If you combine them with a new striker like David Okereke, who has a nose for goals, and speedy wingers like Percy Tau, who came over from Union, who is a second tier team in Belgium, together with Emmanuel Dennis or Crépin Diatta, wingers who were there last season and the season before in Bruges, then you have a combination of skilled technical players, speed, and people who know to make a goal. So would definitely say that those are traditional qualities, but Bruges manages to make them work in the team who plays normally in a 4-3-3, but could easily go into a 3-defender system or something else. Actually, the coach doesn't like to place names or tags on the system. He believes in principles, not in formations. So let's say that he doesn't speak of a 4-3-3, but he would rather prefer that we speak of when Bruges is in possession, he would love to have 7 players before the ball and only a defense that stays behind of 3 players. So that's also something that characterizes Bruges, a modern team that wants to, that knows how modern football should be played and tries to make it happen.
Yeah, you mentioned David Okereke, of course, a new transfer. Young 22-year-old Nigerian striker has already scored 4 goals in 5 games. But during the deadline day, I believe, of course, Galatasaray's Mbaye Diagne was brought in on loan. How do you see him fitting into the team?
Well, it will be a nice experimental case. Actually, I didn't name them during the strengths of the team because we haven't seen him play yet. We also remember Mbaye Diagne from his time at Liers and Westerlo, where he was a crazy genius. He definitely knew how to play football, but next to the pitch he had his stories. And the fans of Galatasaray also have more love-hate relationship with him, which turned into more of a hate relationship during the last months of his stay there. So he definitely has some qualities. I don't expect that he will carry the entire attack of Bruges, but as you say, he can be used as a target man as well. He definitely knows how to score a goal. He isn't the best one during the combination or during the build-up towards the goal. So you could say he is an addition to the team. It makes it possible for Philippe Clement maybe to play a different style of football when things are going tough. But I won't expect that he will play and start every game and be on the pitch for 90 minutes. It's more like an addition in the entire squad, more than making him the key player in attack.
Would you say that Okereke is maybe Clement's new Samatta-like project? Someone you think he can turn into a similar type of goal-scoring threat?
Well, Samatta from Genk, he has, especially next to the fact that he is extremely skilled before goal, he also knows where to run during build-up. Samatta, if you look at a heat map of him, you would see I think 40% of the time you can find him on the left or the right wing. And he loves to sit back to go between the defensive and the midfield line of the opponent, be playable there, and when he receives the ball, he gives it back to the midfielder, or he even turns and makes an action on his own. So he's definitely a dynamic attacker, not the normal or the classic type of number 9 that we all grew up with. And David Okereke also is a very dynamic player, attacker, who really wants to help the team. You won't say he has a big ego and only waits on opportunities so he can score a goal and then be the hero of the day. If you just would look to David Okereke, you would see that he is running the entire time in spaces where he is needed for build-up, but won't be scoring. In the beginning of the season, I also said in our podcast that David Okereke would have a love and hate relationship with the fans, but also with the media, because there will be games like now happened 3 or 4 in a row where he won't score or won't give an assist, but will be useful for the team. And a striker, it's very difficult to emphasize his importance when he doesn't reach his numbers. So in that case, you could say that he will be similar to Samatta, because Samatta had the same spell during the time of Clément at Genk. So it's actually a very nice attacker to look to in a tactical way. And you could say that he is kind of the Mbwane Samatta that Clément used at Genk.
Sounds to me that Mbaya Diagne will have a tough time getting starts for this season, if I'm honest.
Because also the strikers, there are also 2 or 3 other strikers in the team, in the squad. So it's a very competitive line to these days in Bruges, because you think together with the wingers, you maybe have 11 or 12 players who are keen on playing, and there are only 3 positions, so it will be a very tough battle between them.
And another player that might be of interest to most of our listeners is Matej Mitrovic. He moved to Brugge, I think, 2 seasons ago or 1.5 season ago from Besiktas. How has his stint at the club been?
Well, he was there first on loan, and he impressed immediately. But back in those days, there was a buyout option that Bruges could trigger for 5 million euros, and that was seen as a lot of money, because at that time the record transfer of Club Brugge was Hans van Aken together with Koen Daarden, who was a winger in the beginning of the millennium. And Racing Henk too. And that was for about 4 or 5 million. That was a record transfer fee. So actually Mitrovic, a central defender who was good in the team, but wasn't the key player of the team, or wasn't the preferred player by the fans. All of a sudden, he was just a good addition that everybody appreciated. He would have been, he would cost the same than those record transfers. Nowadays, those records are long gone. Bruges has paid a lot for new players, but they also received a lot for outgoing players. And Mitrovic, also that clause in his contract was triggered, so they also brought him in. Then he had some injuries and also some difficulties with getting back in the team after those injuries, because if you compare him with Brandon Mechelen, who is now an international in Belgium, which means a lot if you know that Belgian internationals in defense are names like Vertongen, Company, Alderweireld. Then Mitrovic was having difficulties mostly with build-up play. Under Ivan Leko, it was very important that defenders were contributing to the build-up with a lot of strong, very precise passes, short passes, but also precise long passes, who make it possible for the team to switch the sides, going to the other flanks. And Mitrovic was struggling with that. And then he also had I think it was during a European game, in a Champions League game, where he made an own goal. And that wasn't a very great performance from him. And nowadays, with Simon Dely, who came over, he is a very strong defender, combined with a very great technical ability. So you could say that if everybody is fit, the first options for Clément are Dely and Mechelen, because he loves to play with 2 at the back and not with 3. So Mitrovic, falls out, and you could say he is the first replacement in the ideal scenario of Bruges right now at the moment.
Yeah, an important figure for Brugge in the last couple of years was, of course, Stefano Denswil. And you also already mentioned Dely. Did he adequately replace Denswil, you feel like?
Yeah, Denswil was also very great, very good in the build-up. But I think even Dely is better, because he loves to take risks in the back, and it's a very strange player. If it succeeds in what he does, it's magical. It's a rare situation where a central defender can place a striker directly alone for a goal. Dely also already managed to do that twice. I think in a game against Sint-Truiden in the competition, and one other time. But if you make that pass, there's a lot of risk that it won't succeed. And then it's important to know where you lose that ball. And Dely managed to lose those balls in the defensive line of the opponent, where it's intercepted there. But also, sometimes he is, I don't know how you should call it, but sometimes he just wants to place the ball better for him so he can give the pass, but then there's an interception from an attacker. So he combines great skill, great risk, great attribution to the build-up with actually some stupid mistakes. And he's 25 or 26 years old, so that's probably also the reason that Club Brugge could now buy him and not another big European team, because the things he successfully does are brilliant, but every game you still have one or two situations where you think this could have been done differently, and now the team is in troubles. There haven't been goals coming out of that, or only dangerous situations, but there will be a time that Dele will be responsible for an important goal from the opponent, and we all see it coming right now. But I still prefer having Dele in the team for the positive attribution that he has, rather than putting him out for the possible mistake he could make.
Sounds a lot like, remember very much when Belgian clubs were playing in the Champions League in the past, where the commentators would mention, well, he makes those mistakes in the league, but it doesn't really cost him anything. But here in the Champions League, you pay dividends on any mistake. And that sounds like something that could end up haunting them against Paris St Germain or maybe Real Madrid if they pick up their steam. But before we move on to our next subject, I want to quickly touch on those transfer records you mentioned earlier. And of course, you said that they were already broken this past summer. Simon Mignolet, I believe, came in for 7 million. And then, of course, former football manager wonderkid Ever Balanta was brought in from FC Basel. Everyone who knows him from Football Manager will know him as a central defender, but he was brought in as a central defensive midfielder, where he had been used at Basel recently too. Brugge were for a long time linked with Victor Wanyama. That ended up not happening, maybe for the best. He had some injury issues in the past. But anything you can say about Simon Mignolet, because obviously he has already played.
Yeah, it's actually strange that I haven't mentioned Mignolet in the long list of new players, of new key players of Brugge. And the reason for that is maybe because we are already so used at having a goalkeeper at Brugge who just does what he needs to do. Every time I see Simon Mignolet play in the shirt of Brugge, I think you're still way too good for this competition, because he does everything right and he does everything like you hope a goalkeeper would do. In Brugge, they had a very bad history with goalkeepers since Mathieu Ryan left for Valencia. Has been 4 or 5 years. Ryan now plays at Brighton and Hove Albion. And then, it was so crazy, even till the situation that in one season they used 6 different goalkeepers, which is, insane. It was almost a world record, I believe, at that time. And then, they decided to invest in another goalkeeper, Carlo Letizia, who was a young talent, a young prospect. But he didn't manage to become the real number one. And then Ethan Horvath, one of the 6 keepers who was used during the past season, he regained his position, but there still were some doubts if he would have been ready. So Bruce said Simon Mignolet, who was always a dream for the board to bring him in. They saw a window. They had the money, they had the Champions League qualification, and they managed, and they had the Champions League opportunity to qualify because Mignolet played against Lask, for example, and was a very important asset for Brugge to qualify for the group stage.
Didn't he make his debut against Kiev?
He did it. Yeah, in the second game, so that was also really important. And he came on, and he immediately became a beacon of peace, of rest, it made the defense even feel chill, to put it like that, because every pass he gives, every save he does, it's just by the book. It's textbook what a great goalkeeper should do. So it brings confidence and certainty. So his role should be emphasized, like I do now. Yeah.
And we spoke a lot about their strengths already now, but what would you say are Brugge's main deficiencies? What are their weaknesses? What do you think Paris St Germain, Real Madrid, or even Galatasaray are going to have to look to exploit if they want to get points off of Club Brugge?
Yeah, it will be difficult to predict, because Brugge didn't play a team that actually is better than them right now. You could say that Dynamo Kiev has a lot of qualities, but they're not more qualified or doesn't have more quality in their squad than Bruges. Lask was actually regarding to qualities not the very best opponent, so it will be a surprise for us as well to see how Bruges will play against Real Madrid, against Paris St Germain. Will they be more defensive? Will they put up a wall? I don't think so, because you don't want to play for a point in your own house against PSG or Real Madrid. You want to show something too. You want to believe, or you hope that you have a chance. So you want those hopes turn into beliefs, turn maybe into opportunities, turn maybe in a legendary victory that people will talk about for 20, 25, 30 years. So it's difficult to predict how they will play. And regarding weaknesses, compared with Real Madrid, the quality difference is a main weakness. You can also say Bruges now loves to attack with also very high wingbacks, so there's always space behind those two. What if Dele makes a mistake? So it's difficult to say right now, because there haven't been much teams that put this new modern Bruges into problems. So the weaknesses now are almost positive weaknesses, like, they did forget to finish their chances, and now they only played 0-0 at home against Eupen, or they should have created more chances. So those aren't really weaknesses, in my opinion. Those are actually strengths that haven't been as strong as expected. So it will be a surprise for us as well to see how where Real Madrid, Paris St Germain, or Galatasaray can see weaknesses in this team, and how they will exploit them.
And then my final football-related question is really your predictions on the group. Where do you see Club Brugge ending? How do you see the final standings in this group in general? And where do you think they will struggle with most?
Let's say that it will be a battle for third place together with Galatasaray. It's classic prediction, but I still believe that everybody dreams of a scenario where Bruges, like Ajax last year, can make it difficult to Real Madrid. But you still have to be fair that even if you can, I think there will be a period in the home game, maybe 15 minutes, maybe 20 minutes, that Bruges will make it difficult to Real Madrid. But if you look, combined with the game at Bernabeu, then Real will definitely get 4 out of 6 points. So with PSG the same. PSG just has even more quality in my eyes than Real Madrid. They have the individual skills of a lot of players. Neymar will be there again. Cavani, Mbappe, of course. So they also midfield is wonderful. So it will be very difficult for Bruges to compete for a top 2 place. Some people believe it, but I think you're not very aware of the strength of international European football at this moment if you think that Bruges could go for a second place. And with Galatasaray, it's actually the great unknown. Everybody knows the history between Galatasaray and Bruges, especially in Belgium, because that was one of those games at home. I think it was 2003 or 2002, where
2004,
Bruges won.
I think, with
2004,
right?
So where they won that group stage game. So that's still one of the big victories in Bruges history. It's difficult to say how strong they are. Definitely you will be able to make a better comparison, but it will be a battle for third place between those two teams, I think.
Okay, and then finally, my final question in general is, do you have any travel tips for fans who plan to make the trip to Brugge, or Real Madrid, Paris St Germain, Galatasaray fans who want to make that away trip? It's of course a beautiful city, but the stadium is located a little bit outside the city. What's the best way to get to the stadium, and what should they do when they're there?
Well, first of all, get your ticket, because I've heard that, it's already sold out, only with people who are a member of the club, so who have a season pass. They had the first choice to be there for the Champions League seats, and they almost all accepted that. They just also bought that mini membership for the Champions League group stage, so there won't be any more tickets left to sell. For away, so because I know and I've heard that a lot of away fans, especially also Turkish fans of Galatasaray who maybe live in Belgium, who try to make an account on the Bruges website and try to obtain tickets that are actually allocated to the home site. So that's definitely off the table because there just aren't any tickets anymore. For the away fans, I think you should love the atmosphere in Turkey. Galatasaray, it's different, of course, but if you look in Belgian perspectives, to Belgian norms, Bruges is definitely one of the teams where they sing the most, they make the most atmosphere, they create the most atmosphere. So I would say enjoy it. The stadium is old, very old, too old. It feels like it's coming down at a certain point. So it's not strange that Bruges is looking for a new location to build a new stadium. But it's maybe classic football style. It's football back in it's that evening of football in the 80s where you see a traditional, very stony stadium. With fans who are very happy to be in the Champions League, who will support the team no matter what, who will whistle towards the referee when he makes, even if it's a correct call, that would benefit the opponent. So you should and try to enjoy that. And next to that, Bruges is definitely a great city, but if you really want to be in a nice city, and that's always have been a battle between Bruges and the city where I live in, Ghent. You could even come to Ghent, stay here overnight, have a lovely city trip, and then you can take the train to Bruges, which is 30 or 40 minutes away, and probably the hotel or the Airbnb or the motel or the camping places where you could stay overnight will be a lot cheaper maybe in that period, because Ghent plays Europa League, so they won't be there till Thursday, the fans. So maybe if you look at price and you look at some cultural things and you look at you just take the train and a bus and you're at the stadium, you come back at night and you have a lovely evening in the nightlife of Ghent. So maybe that's a tip if you don't manage to get a place nearby the stadium in Bruges, which will be more expensive than elsewhere, I believe.
Yeah, and definitely bring a jacket, because that away section, it's
okay,
high,
indeed,
and it's cold.
And windy.
I've been there myself. It's not fun if it's in a European away game in November or something. Definitely bring a jacket.
Yeah, the stadium isn't closed, so there are small gaps in the stadium, and one of the main gaps is the place between the away fan section and the east tribunes of the club. So that's definitely a great tip, because even it will be maybe 18, 19, 20 degrees still there next week on that Wednesday evening. A jacket is certainly necessary indeed.
And for the Galatasaray fans who don't have a ticket yet, you can go over to the Ultraslan forums and you can apply for a ticket there. I know our co-host Umut just got one the other day, so I think they're still available, so you can try your luck and see if you can get a ticket still. Guillaume, Maebe, thank you very much for your insights on Club Brugge, and of course thank you for listening to this, but we will be continuing our preview next with Galatasaray. And from pot 4 are, of course, the Turkish league champions Galatasaray. And here to talk to us about Galatasaray is our in-house expert, Özer Dindjer. Özer, thank you and welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. It's nice to be part of a spin-off episode.
Yeah, this is... I think it's going to be a great episode. Of course, we had Jonathan Johnson on for Paris St Germain, Ben Hayward for Real Madrid, and Guillaume Maebe for Club Brugge. And now you are the fourth guest, the honorary guest for Galatasaray, of course. So you're among great company.
Well, indeed. I hope to do justice as an ambassador to our club in this conversation, because we are amongst some big names. Real Madrid, PSG in recent years, who become one of the top tiers of football, and of course Bruges, or as I should say properly, Brugge, who have been making some noise in recent seasons in the Europa League as well. So It's a fun, competitive group, and Well, let's have some fun. Let's have some fun, guys.
That's definitely an understatement. I think it's definitely going to be fun, a competitive group for sure. You know, if Galatasaray managed to get out of this group, even into the Europa League, I think would be a good performance. But if they manage to get to the next round, that would be a serious achievement among these two really big European clubs.
I agree. We do have it in our genes to succeed against all the odds, and we like a challenge too, as we saw most recently in 2013, getting out of a group with Real Madrid and Juventus in as well, and in such dramatic circumstances. So we love a challenge. We love the drama. I say, bring it on.
Yeah, and maybe in a way it's even better to get a really difficult group like this, because last season Galatasaray obviously got a good draw, but then the only thing you can really do is lose, because you're expected to do really well in a group like that, and it's never easy in the Champions League. The teams that are in the Champions League are always going to be quality sides.
Yeah.
Now you're kind of in a position.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Now you're in a position of there's not really anything to lose, and you can only win. Even if you just beat one of the two in one match, that's still a good accomplishment.
Yeah, that's very true. And I think if you look back to last year's group, I couldn't have wished for a better group myself. And you can see even from my tweets of the day last year, the three other opposition teams were exactly the ones I and probably millions of other fans wanted. But unfortunately, as you say, we kind of fell flat on our face last season. I mean, we had other extenuating circumstances. We played without a striker and this and that, but ultimately it was the group that we wanted, and we fell flat at the first hurdle. In this case, we have some challenging opposition. We've got the world's media on facing Istanbul as well. So it's an opportunity for us to relish, and we can only win. If we win a couple of games here, then it'll only be a boost for us.
And you got a striker this year.
Exactly, we did. one who is going to be, in my opinion, our key player, in fact.
Well, let's hope so for the Turkish coefficients and for Galatasaray.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's probably quite unusual for this spin-off series to, when you talk to people and ask about their key players, they mention someone who's never worn the jersey of their club before. But in this case, Radamel Falcao, such is the weight and expectation on his shoulders, and the kind of the pressure that's going to be on him to deliver, is he's definitely going to be our key player going forward. But having said that, he's a big game player. He's played in many different leagues in some top clubs. He loves playing in European competition. So I think it's only natural that he would be also the key player for the opposition to watch as well. Of course, we all know he's this big, strong guy. He's got amazing aerial presence, accuracy of his shots. He can come in playing from the box, play outside the box. He can score from anywhere. So Radamel Falcao is definitely the one to watch for Ghana.
Yeah, and we immediately jumped over to key players, because obviously Galatasaray won the league in Turkey last season. They qualified directly for the Champions League group stages. So there's not really much to talk about in regards to how did they get there. But apart from Radamel Falcao, as you rightfully pointed out, he hasn't played a match yet, but obviously he is going to be a big part of this Galatasaray side. Who else would you highlight as key players for the team that are going to be essential for Galatasaray to do well in this group?
Well, I think two honourable mentions I'll give will be to our two wingers, Ryan Babel on the left wing and Sofiane Feghouli on the right wing. Babel contributes a lot with goals, and he's got an experienced, cool head on his shoulders as well. We saw him deliver wonderfully for Besiktas in the Champions League a couple of seasons ago as well. He knows the league, so he knows the league and the club and the club's philosophy and everything, so he can kind of settle in quite comfortably in the Galatasaray 11. Then you've got Feghouli as well, who we've had playing in that right wing for some time. He is an excellent passer of the ball. He's making some great assists right now. He's taking a lot of responsibility and leadership on the pitch. So these two guys, Babel on the left, Feghouli on the right, will need to be on their best form to pick out Falcao in the box, especially against some of these esteemed defences that we'll be up against, and particularly to fill in any gaps that we might have in midfield creativity. And I say that on the back of the fact that we made a lot of transfers in that area, but a lot of new players playing together, it might take a little bit of time to gel. So I think we'll be looking to these guys on the wings to make the instant impact to help out Falcao.
Yeah, and you did allude to those new transfers. Michael Seri in on loan from Fulham, Lemina in on loan from Southampton, if I'm not mistaken, and of course Steven Nzonzi in on loan from AS Roma. And on top of that, you already have Younes Belhanda. Galatasaray do have a lot of luxury in terms of their central midfield right now. They definitely have, on paper at least, a midfield that is definitely up to snuff to Champions League standards.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And I think the difference between us having this conversation now and if we'd had this conversation a week ago would have been huge. Namely because of that gap in midfield. Not to mention the fact that we have a striker now as well. But before, I think when the Champions League draw was made, we were all thinking, okay, Real Madrid, PSG, how can we even compete with these guys? Then you've got Brugge, who are kind of a little bit of an unknown to Turkish fans. Also because they haven't been playing that regularly in the final stages of the Champions League, but they're also a great team. We might even struggle for third place, is probably what was going on through our minds. But fast forward a week, now we have a Lemina who came in, which was a kind of surprise last-moment deal. We have Falcao, which was a deadline day deal that was finalised. So suddenly we have a lot of heavyweight talent and quality in the midfield to pair up with our striker and our wingers. So now I think at the very least we should be able to compete with the big two in the group, and we should feel relatively confident that we should at least be able to finish third in this group. So that's I think the difference that the extra midfield dynamos have brought to our mentality, our extra confidence.
So definitely Galatasaray offensively are looking impressive, but how are they looking defensively in terms of, let's say, the weakness of the team? Would you agree that maybe defensively Galatasaray are a little prone?
Well, Khan, as a friend, this was kind of the question I thought you weren't going to ask me, so I'm a little bit disappointed that we have to talk about this because it's a sore subject. But our defence really is not up to scratch compared to the midfield and attack force that we have right now. It's a very imbalanced squad in that respect. We didn't make any transfers in the central defence area where we have Luyendama and Marcao. I think Marcao is quite weak. I think his positioning is poor. And then we have Luyendama, his partner, who's quite slow. And he can often make some rash, harsh, bulldozer-esque challenges in the penalty box, which none of the things that you really look for in a Champions League defensive duo, unfortunately. Then if you expand kind of your analysis of the defence and look at Nagatomo, who is actually one of my favourite players, and I've always praised him highly, but I have to admit that his form is dipped of late. And then you've got Mariano on the right wing, who leaves a lot of defensive gaps because he goes forward a lot. But I don't actually think that he's that productive when he goes forward either. His crossing isn't up to scratch. Although I will admit, 1 in 10 crosses maybe is a bit of a peach that ends up in a goal. So he's got that in his armoury. We just don't see it enough from Mariano. And of course, we know that the way that Terim likes playing with two explosive wing-backs. So these guys, Nagatomo and Mariano, are going to be up doing all the work on the flanks alongside Feghouli and Bubble, but they're going to be leaving a lot of gaps behind, and I'm not sure Luyendama and Marcao have the quality, or maybe it's just the experience at this stage, to be able to keep up with those household names of Real Madrid and PSG.
Yeah, and maybe another point as well is that Martin Lines has not been included in the squad now. Of course, Galatasaray, any Turkish team, are only allowed 14 foreigners. Lines was the sacrificial lamb because, of course, Lemina and Falcao came in on deadline day. Diagne went to Club Brugge, interestingly enough, but Lemina then ended up joining, so a foreign spot needed to be freed up, and that was, Martin Lines, who was sacrificed, and he was a utility player because he played on both left and right back. And with those two aging fullbacks, you might have an issue in terms of what if one of them gets injured.
Yeah, I agree with that, and I think the description you use of him being the sacrificial lamb is the right one, because it conjures up this kind of like cringy, sad, tragic imagery of a lamb being slaughtered. And Lines is such a great guy, and such a thing couldn't have happened to a better person. He's a great character on the pitch, off the pitch, and everyone is aligned in thinking he didn't deserve this. He didn't deserve this, and actually we didn't deserve this either, because, as you say, he is a great utility player. He can play left, he can play right, he can even play in midfield if necessary. We've seen that in a few games in the past as well. So it's a shame that the way that the cookies crumbled has meant that Lines is the one who's been sacrificed, because he is actually a really big loss for our squad depth in the Champions League. And another thing for us to really think about is our potential weakness in attack, because we talked a lot about the defence, but regular listeners of Football a la Turca will know my discomfort when seeing Belhanda in the starting lineup, let's say. But I do think that he's a potential hole and a big weakness for us in that central attacking midfield position. He gives away possession way too often and way too easily, and that's a huge problem. I mean, it's already a problem when you're playing in the Turkish Super League, but it's going to be a much bigger deal in the Champions League as well. He's quite lethargic, and his passing accuracy just isn't up to the standard it needs to be. He's not very strong. He's got pretty bad temperament as well. So again, that could be a huge red flag in the Champions League if it turns out and translates as, yellow cards or heaven forbid red cards again in the Champions League. But the question that this poses is, we signed Lemina, we signed Seri and Nzonzi for the midfield trio. But where does this leave Belhanda? Because one of those three guys, or Belhanda, is going to have to make way in order to fit these players into the squad. And I'd be curious to see if, after a while, Belhanda actually makes way for either Lemina or somebody else in that midfield sort of attacking position. I'd be curious to see if Terim gives Belhanda the chop after the first few rounds of the Champions League. If his performance isn't up to scratch, of course. I mean, I'm fully hoping that he proves me wrong and throws egg on my face. I want nothing more, but we'll see about that.
Great imagery right there. So you mentioned the big man there, Fatih Terim. Tell us a little bit more about the man Fatih Terim, the coach Fatih Terim. How does he have Galatasaray play? What can Paris St Germain, Real Madrid and Club Brugge expect when they're facing Galatasaray?
What can they expect when they're facing it? Okay, well, I suppose all guns blazing, chaos football is what they should expect. Terim, the Emperor, Imperator, always likes to set up his teams in a way that they play the most exciting, the most attacking, drama-filled football. So Terim is the man, after all, who fielded a 4-4-2 against Real Madrid in Madrid and had both Drogba and Burak Yilmaz up front, which was absolutely crazy, downright actually irresponsible at the time, if we consider how that game went. But so I think he's one-dimensional in that respect because he plays all-out attack football. However, not very many coaches in Europe play that kind of football. So it's not very easy to set your team up necessarily to counteract that because it's not something you're going to see in the league, in your own domestic league or in the Champions League. So sometimes that all-guns blazing approach actually takes teams by surprise and can work in your advantage too. In terms of the way Galatasaray are playing right now, Terim has been setting up the team in a 4-2-3-1 formation with a central defensive midfielder and a more attack-minded central midfielder in that 2 position. So we're going to be likely to see Nzonzi and Seri as the defensive and the central midfielders in that 2, and then up front in the 3, likely to see Ryan Babel and Sofian Feghouli on the wings, probably starting with Belhanda in that number 10 position, maybe Lemina instead, or maybe just a shuffling of that triangle in midfield as well. Of course, not to mention we have the likes of Emre Mor, who can come off the bench as well, who are really explosive, fast, kind of driven wingers as well. We've got Adem Büyük, who scored a critical goal and has shown at the weekend, and has shown his quality time and time again when he's been playing in a Galatasaray jersey. So these kind of joker cards that Terim has on his bench could be quite important for Champions League as well. But I mentioned before about Terim's keenness to play with these kind of with these wing backs. So we can often leave a lot of space in defence behind these guys. So it's often in Europe we can see quite easy amateurish goals that were kind of almost Rule 1 football. Someone lifts the ball up, someone else runs into the space and scores against a Muslera who's been left isolated by his defence. So I can't unfortunately see us getting out of that habit right now. I don't see any evidence from Galatasaray to suggest that we fix that naivety in defence. So my biggest fear in the Champions League is going to be leaving huge caverns of space in the final third for the opposition to exploit. But my hope is that we have the quality in midfield and up front to be able to offset that and hopefully cause a few upsets in the league, in the Champions League, I should say. I keep forgetting which podcast we're doing now.
Well, and then finally, what are your predictions and expectations for the group? How do you see Galatasaray faring in this group? What do you think will be the final standing after 6 match days? And is there an opponent you expect Galatasaray to struggle with in particular? And who do you think are they going to make? Whose life do you think they're going to make difficult themselves?
Oh, okay, that's a fully loaded question. I like it. You're really putting me on the spot here, Khan. But okay, I'll start with this. So we signed 12 new players over the summer. So that's more than enough to construct an entire team. But the challenge here is to get all these guys to gel together quickly enough. Most of these guys that we've signed haven't even had the benefit of preseason, and so that's going to be a problem when trying to get Terim's system to kind of work in its highest gear from the outset. So that's going to be a big challenge for us. But like I said, I think before, when the draw was made and we hadn't made these transfers, we were kind of planning on watching the Champions League games from behind the sofa. But now we can at least sit down with pride, crack open a beer, and get excited about these games, because we do have a competitive team now, at the very least on paper. So my grand prediction is going to be that we will have a good home performance. I'll say that much. I believe that we can win 2 games at home and draw the other one. So I think we'll remain unbeaten at home, and I think we can beat Brugge, and I think we can beat Real Madrid, and I think we'll draw against PSG. However, away from home, I expect us to lose all our games because we.
That's quite dry. There's your English humor for you.
Yeah. You see, the thing is, we have an abysmal away record in the Turkish league already. When you expand the magnifying glass and compare that into the European context, we have a really even worse record. I don't have the statistics near me, but I remember it's like 1 in very many games.
2 wins in 26.
I was hoping again that you wouldn't do this to me, but yeah, 2 wins in 26. I mean that's poor enough for me to suggest that our away record is going to be pretty poor.
I can just 2 wins and a draw, if you'd like.
Yeah, you see, I like to have a balance in my expectation. I'm being overly optimistic with my home record, and maybe overly pessimistic with my away record. So hopefully we'll meet somewhere in between. But I do expect us to have a good home form because of the incredible, passionate display from our fans that always makes us always makes them the 12th man. In some cases, we've seen in the past the 13th man. The fans make such a difference, and cannot overestimate the importance that full arena makes for these European nights. We've seen it time and time again.
Definitely, especially for Turkish clubs, we've seen that so often, that atmosphere and. That's something that a lot of teams fear, of course, but probably Real Madrid not so much. They're used to that, but Paris St Germain.
You say that, but in 2013, of course, they were 1-0 up in the arena and flying on aggregate, and then suddenly in the second half, 1-2-3, sledgehammer Galatasaray comes out, suddenly 3-1 up, couple of goals away on aggregate. One more goal comes in from Drogba, but the referee rules it offside, and had that goal gone in, there would have been a huge wave of red and yellow attacks, and I don't have a shadow of a doubt that we would have qualified that game, caused one of the great European upsets. But the potential is there. The fans did their bit, but the referee should have gone to Specsavers. That's all I can say.
Well, one thing is for sure, this is, at least on paper, Galatasaray's best team, I would argue, in the last 3 years for their Champions League campaign. They look most ready. Like you rightfully pointed out, last season they had that huge lack of a striker. And maybe the year before, I can't really recall what the big issue was back then. But yeah, this is definitely their best team on paper. Of course, an old squad has to be pointed out. How will they handle fatigue accumulating? It all depends a little bit on who you play when. But yeah, that's a problem that I don't really think that many of the players, despite the fact that they're older, are physically declined yet. So it should not be a massive issue, I think.
That's a good point. The aging squad is a real issue for us in terms of planning, even in the short term. But as you say, we haven't seen kind of physical manifestation in that yet. Maybe
only
the
Nagatomo
defense,
and Mariano
Nagatomo and Mariano jump up, because Terim asked them to do a lot of running up and down the pitch. So it's kind of understandable that it wears them out, and it makes it even more surprising, actually, that because of that we don't have Linus in the squad, because he would have been a great utility player to fill in for that.
Yeah, for sure, 100%. And I always feel like he's a little bit underrated. He got some harsh criticism early on when he first joined the club, but afterwards I felt like he kind of found his role in the team and always put in a decent performance. Feels like a little bit of an underrated player.
Absolutely agree with that, absolutely. And we have to thank Mustafa Denizli for signing Martin Linus. It was his legacy of his most recent tenure at the club.
So I'm going to ask you to go out on a limb. Give me 1, 2, 3, 4 for the standings in this group.
Oh, okay, all right. I'm gonna say PSG will top the group, and it hurts me to say that, because PSG is a club that's kind of sprouted out of nowhere, and I don't like to see that kind of impact in football translate to the Champions League. But their squad is so strong, their attacking prowess is so unbelievable that I can't see them not finishing top of this group. Real Madrid, meanwhile, a lot of people say that they aren't the club that they used to be, especially now that Ronaldo's left, and to an extent I agree with that. But Real Madrid is still Real Madrid. They have made a lot of investment in their squad, and I don't expect them to be any sort of pushover just because Ronaldo isn't around. I mean, I do expect from a purely Galatasaray perspective, if you look at the times we played Real in the last 3-4 years, Ronaldo has been that difference. I mean, had it not been for Ronaldo, we would have been in the semi-final in 2013. That much is true. But I don't know if that really, what happened a few years ago, is really going to translate into form today. So I think Real Madrid will finish second. I think Galatasaray will finish third, but we'll give clubs a good run for their money. And I think we will, at the very least, go into the Europa League. So that's where I'm setting my stall right now. If anything beyond that, I'll be over the moon.
Well, good luck to Galatasaray. Thank you very much, Özer Dindjer, for your insights on the club, of course.
Pleasure.
And thank you very much to Jonathan Johnson, Guillaume Maebe, and of course Ben Hayward for his insights on Real Madrid as well. So thank you to all of you who contributed to this episode. And for those of you who are new to the podcast, please give us a subscribe and go back and listen to our other Europa League previews. We previewed Trabzonspor's group, which consists out of FC Basel, Getafe and Krasnodar. And we also previewed Başakşehir's group, which consists out of AS Roma, Wolfsburger from Austria, and Borussia Mönchengladbach. And then, of course, we also have a preview up for Beşiktaş's Group K in the Europa League, but that one you'll have to go and find on the Black Eagles podcast feed. We previewed their group, which consists out of Beşiktaş, of course, SC Braga, Wolverhampton Wanderers, of course, and Slovan Bratislava. Thank you all for listening, and see you all next week.